So we go to chapter 18 in economics A level, market failure in the labor market. Market failure is all about inefficiency in the market. But when it comes to the labor market, where the labor market is where the demand for labor and the supply of labor have, connection. That is what the labor market is. So there's market failure in the labor market when labor resources are not allocated efficiently, leading to lower wages, unemployment, or underemployment, which reduces the overall societal welfare. So there's labor market failure if decisions made in the labor market brings about underemployment, unemployment, and low wage rate. Because all these, if they happened, they reduce the societal welfare. And if that occurs, then there's a labor market failure. I think the point is clear. So what are the causes of labor market failure? Number one, we have immobility of labor, we have information failure, we have skills gaps and poaching, we have monopoly power of employer, we have discrimination, we have externalities, and we have coordination failure. So we're going to start one at a time. The first one is labor immobility. When we talk about labor immobility, we're simply talking about the inability of workers to be able to move from one region to another, or to be able to change or switch from one occupation to another. So here I got labor immobilities. Workers may be unable to move to where jobs are available due to high cost or social ties, that is geographical, or lack of necessary skills, which is occupational mobility. So leading to unemployment or underemployment. So you might not be able to move from one region to another because of family ties or high cost of living or transportation. That is geographical. So if you are able to move, you might be able to take a job here, take a job there. If your movement is, if there's a free flow of movement, then you might not be underemployed. Or probably you are unemployed because you are unable to move. So underemployment might be because you cannot reach certain area. That is underemployment. So you have free time, but that place, that region is so far away from you, then you are underemployed. You might be unemployed because you cannot move to certain area. That is geographical immobility. I think it's clear.
Yeah.
Then occupational means you don't have that flexibility to switch from one job to another. I was a banker, now I'm a teacher. That is that is occupational mobility. But I might not be able to teach if I don't have the required skills to teach. Do you understand?
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why we could have market failure in the labor market. The second one is information failure. I'm not talking about information failure. We're talking about both employers and employees lacking certain information about wages, about employment opportunity, about skills, leading to inefficient matches or mismatch. So employers might not understand that there are still pool of workers for specific job function, but because they don't know, they employ anyone into that position. That is putting the square peg in a round hole. That could bring about market failure in the labor market. You get that? The third one is skills gap and poaching. Firms may underinvest in general workers training because other firms can poach trained workers without bearing the training cost. So some firms might feel reluctant to train their workers because they know as soon as they are trained, they become attractive to their rivals. So what's their gain? So they don't want to train. That's another reason why we could have market failure in the labor market. Is it clear?
Yeah.
The next one is monopoly power, which is about the only employer. So a single or dominant employer can suppress wages below competitive level, leading to lower employment and wages that compared to in a competitive market. A monopoly, because it has a substantial power to negotiate. As a result of that, instead of paying where MC equals to D, it will rather pay below it. And that is where suppression comes in. And it can do that by reducing the numbers of workers it needs to employ. So when the demand for it reduces, supply exceeds demand, then the wage rate will definitely fall. I think it's clear. Any question about that?
No.
Then the next one that could cause market failure. The next one that could cause market failure in the labor market is discrimination. When we talk about discrimination, we're simply talking about decisions that bring about wage inequality. So here with employers, discrimination can lead to wage inequality and limited career progression for certain groups, even when they possess the necessary skills. These individuals, they have the skills, but they are not being employed because they are not from country X. So we want only country X nationals. We don't want foreigners to, to be part of this employment. Or even if they are going to be part of this, we'll pay them less. So some people might have the skills, but they are still getting low wages because of discrimination. So discrimination is what? A market failure when it comes to labor market, because it could become a barrier to entry, to supply of labor. Do you understand? Another one is externalities. Here, the externalities here, a positive externality leading to a negative externality. So yeah, the provision of general skills can create positive externalities for other firms and society, leading to under provision by the private sector. The private sector might not want to. So the next one is externalities. So when we talk about externalities here, it's a positive externality, but this positive externality becomes an issue for the private sector. So the provision of general skills can create positive externalities for other firms and society, leading to under provision by the private sector. So if the private sector trains workers, they become useful to the society. So which simply means workers, the private sector might feel reluctant, to engage themselves. So they under provide whatever is required to put you out there to be useful for everybody. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And the last one is coordination failures. In some cases, workers may choose a low effort equilibrium because they lack the incentive to unilaterally switch to higher effort equilibrium, even if all would be better off with joint efforts. Some workers, they understand that doing much will allow them to be better, but they don't want to put themselves into that situation to start thinking about putting much effort. So leaving this environment, moving to that environment, or leaving this job, moving to that job, give them some stress. So they don't want to do it at all. As a result of that, they prefer to stay where they are. And that simply means that wherever they are needed, they won't be available. And that is a barrier to what? To supply of labor. So it's a barrier. Why? It's a barrier because there are some people that are able to do the job, but they are not making themselves available.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
So it's a market failure because there's what? There's barrier to supply of labor. Any question about that?
No.
So these are the causes of market failure in the labor market. Any question about
No.
that? So that takes us to mobility of labor. Are you there? The mobility of labor.
Okay.
Yes. Shall we? Okay. So the mobility of labor. Mobility of labor only occurs in a perfect market. We're talking about the perfect labor market. Why is it a perfect labor market? It's a perfect labor market because there's both occupational mobility and geographical mobility. So if there's occupational mobility and geographical mobility, that makes the labor market what? A perfect labor market. Do you get it? Then I wrote, in a perfect labor market, there are no barriers to the supply of labor to any region or any occupation, which simply means that the market is perfect based on the fact that there's both geographical and occupational mobility of labor. Do you understand the occupational mobility of labor here?
Yeah.
So we only have occupational mobility of labor if there are no barriers to the supply of labor. And when there are no barriers to the supply of labor, it simply means what? There's both geographical mobility and occupational mobility. Any question about that?
Yeah.
So that takes us to, so for mobility of labor, like I said earlier, we have geographical mobility of labor and occupational mobility of labor. We have these in a perfect labor market. But if it is a perfect labor market, there's no market failure, right? But here, the bone of contention is market failure in the labor market. So one of the reasons why we could have market failure in the labor market is because of immobility of labor. So when it comes to immobility of labor, we have geographical immobility of labor and we have occupational immobility of labor. But we're starting with what? Geographical immobility of labor. So why do we call it geographical immobility of labor? It is geographical immobility of labor because workers find it difficult to move from one area to another or from one region to another to find work. So here I go. Geographical immobility of labor occurs when workers find it difficult to move from one area or region or country to another for work. I think it's clear. So what are the causes of geographical immobility of labor? There are different factors that bring about geographical immobility of labor. The first one is economical and financial factor. The second one is social and personal factor. And the third one is information and structural factors. So we're going to start with economical and financial factors. So when we talk about economical and financial factor, one of the economical and financial factor is high housing cost. So variation in house and rental prices between regions make it difficult and unaffordable for workers to relocate to areas with more job opportunities. So people feel reluctant to move from one area to another because of high cost of rent or high cost of accommodation. The second one is moving cost. So if you have to move from one region to another or from one area to another, the expenses in selling your properties, the expenses in moving your property from one place to another can also make you to feel reluctant to move. Do you get the second point here? The third one is cost of living. Differences in the cost of living, including food, transportation, and general expenses, can make certain areas less appealing for potential movers. So some people might not want to move to certain regions because the standard of living or the cost of living there is high. So they won't, the cost of food, the cost of clothing, it's high over there, so they don't want to move. That could also bring about geographical immobility of labor. Do you get that point?
Yeah.
And the last one is transportation cost and infrastructure. High travel costs and poor or inadequate public transport links can make it difficult for people to commute to new jobs, even if they have a car. If the road is not good, it gets your car spoiled. So you start thinking about the cost of moving, the cost of transportation, the cost of the links when you can commute. If they are not always available, then there's no point moving from that area, from your area where you have comfort to another area. Do you understand? So these are what we call financial and economical factors. I think they are clear.
Yeah.
Then the next one is social. For social and personal factors, we're talking about things that are linked to the society or your own decision. So the first one is family ties. People are often reluctant to move away from their families, friends, and established social network, which can anchor them to a particular area. So I might not want to move because my family are within this area. I might not want to move because I have, network with friends and family within this area. So moving away from them means I might deprive myself of those things I was enjoying. So that's one of the reasons why I'm not going to be able to move. Family ties. The second one is education and children. People might feel reluctant to move because moving means they have to change the schools or they have to change the schools of their kids. And that might, it might take time because the kids, they might have friends in that area, they get used to that particular area. So that might also make the parents think about not moving. You get the second point about social and personal factor here, which is education and children. The third one, cultural and language barrier. So when we talk about culture, the way of life, differences in culture, language, or lifestyle between the regions or countries can act as a significant barrier to relocation, especially for international movement. So I might not be able to move to China because of language barrier. I might not be able to move because the culture there is not what I know about. So my movement is being deterred as a result of the way of life over there. Do you understand culture and language barrier?
Yeah.
The last one is personal preferences. So these are your own decisions. Workers may simply prefer to stay in the familiar and comfortable environment rather than face the stress of moving to an unknown location. So you feel comfortable here. So what's the point moving to an area that you don't know what could happen in the future? So these are personal and social factor. Is it clear?
Yeah.
And the last one is information and structural factors. When we talk about information and structural factors, we're talking about lack of information, the first one. So lack of information, workers may be unaware of job availability in other geographical areas due to lack of information. So I'm not aware that there's job opportunity in Misrata. So I stay here in Tripoli because I don't know that there's availability of job in that area. So I'm lacking information. So that restricts my movement to Misrata. I wouldn't want to just go to Misrata to play. I want to go there to work, but I am not aware, I don't have any information stating that there's availability of job over there. So that could also bring about geographical immobility of labor under information and structural factors. The second one is migration controls, accessibility to visa. So you might not have visa. You might there's some countries you might find it difficult to to get their visa. So that might make it difficult for you to want to work in those areas. I think it's clear.
Yeah.
The last one is lack of public services. Limited access to public transportation and other essential services in certain areas can also discourage workers from moving there. So if you figure out that basic amenities are not available in the area you want to go to, that will be provided by the government. So it simply means you have to pay for virtually everything there, essential services. So that might discourage you from moving to such area. So these are the reasons why we could have geographical immobility of labor. Any question about that?
No.
So we'll go to the consequences of geographical immobility of labor after now. So going to the consequences of geographical immobility of labor. We already know what geographical immobility of labor means. It simply means the inability of workers to be able to move from one area to another, from one country to another to find work. That is geographical immobility of labor. So when geographical immobility of labor occurs, what are the consequences of such situation? Number one, differences in wage rates. So if there is geographical immobility of labor, it simply means those areas that have unfilled vacancy will have higher wages than where there is high unemployment rate. There's high unemployment rate in this region because people are stuck in this region. They like it here, and there's no more job here. So the wage rate where there's high unemployment is always lower compared to a place where they need employment, where the demand for labor is high. So demand for labor is high because there are unfilled vacancies in such area. Do you understand the differences here? So I wrote differences in wage rates. Higher wages will be paid in areas where there are unfilled job vacancies. In those areas, there will be more demand for labor. That increases the wage rate, right? And lower wage rates in areas of high unemployment. In the other area where there is a lot of people there that are not moving, there's high supply of labor, which drops the wage rate. Do you understand the first point here?
Yeah.
So the wage rate differences will still remain. Why? Because people will be attracted to where wages are high, causing their movement, than then workers living in the area of low wage rates will create unfilled vacancy, which will in turn increase wage rates where the workers left. Now, area A, there are unfilled vacancy, which make wage rates increase in that area, right? In area B, there's high unemployment rate, which reduces the wage rate. Yes or no? So people would now start moving. Area A becomes attractive for people to move in there because the wage rate is high. So a lot of people will move from area B to area A, so that because of the attractiveness in the wage rate. But what happens to area B? Area B will start having unfilled vacancy. Yes or no?
Yeah.
So which simply means the same situation will still come back to area B. So does it solve the problem? No. The problem is never solved. And that is still a market failure. Do you understand the first point there?
Yeah.
The second one, increasing differences in house prices between different areas or regions. House prices will be higher in areas or regions where there is lack of workers due to high wage rate. Prices here, so where there is unfilled vacancy, that means the demand for workers are high in those areas, right? So in those areas, income is expected to rise in those areas, yes or no? So that means the price of rent in those areas are expected to what? To increase. Compared to areas that have high unemployment. Areas that have high unemployment rate, they don't have income. So it is expected that the price of rent, the price of accommodation is what? Is expected to fall. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So people will feel reluctant to move from those areas where there's high unemployment to areas that are unfilled vacancy, because the rent or the cost of rent in those areas that have unfilled vacancy is higher compared or relative to the areas that have high unemployment rate. So that could also deter or cause geographical immobility of labor. Do you get it? So the consequence is that people would still not want to move, because moving means they have to pay high cost. They have to pay high amount of money in terms of the price of rent. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
So this will cause higher barriers to mobility of labor, making it less likely workers to move. So workers will not want to move because the cost of rent, the cost of accommodation, the cost of housing in those areas are high compared to where there's unemployment. So they will prefer to stay where there's high unemployment than to move to where there is demand for labor based on the fact that there's high rents to pay. Is it clear?
Yeah.
The third consequence is that firms will not be able to expand or fulfill contracts as they plan to due to unfilled job vacancies. So firms would not be able to plan, would not be able to carry out or execute their contract because they need workers and there are a lot of unfilled vacancy. People are not willing to come to those areas. So which simply means firms might as well leave. They might choose to, leave those regions. And when they leave those regions, it means output within those regions reduces. Do you understand? Do you understand, please?
Yeah.
And the last consequence is about the standard of living. As we have high cost of rent in where there are unfilled vacancy, it also affects those areas that have high unemployment rate. The standard of living in areas that have high unemployment rate is always what? Low. So I wrote, there will be lower standard of living in areas with high unemployment, and this will affect other businesses in that area as demand for goods and services is expected to fall. Areas with high unemployment rates, level of income is expected to fall. They won't have disposable income. They won't even have the purchasing power. So which means businesses in those areas will be affected because they will have less revenue based on the fact that there's high unemployment rate in those areas. So these are the consequences of geographical immobility of labor. Any question?
No.
Any question? So in the next class, we're going to talk about occupational immobility of labor.
Okay.